Acts 26 to begin with, and I'm going to start with verse 12. If anybody if you don't have it, there's a Bible in front of you. Again, it's going to be Acts 26. I'm going to begin with 12. Father, we just thank you once again for the opportunity to come before your throne.
Amen.
We just pray that you just touch us, Father. We pray that you open our eyes that we may see, our ears that we may hear, our heart that we may obtain. More importantly, give us a voice that we may share. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Again, I'd like to thank you for coming this morning. And I'm going to start a little series called The Road to Damascus. And I know I've talked about this many times, but really this is one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible. And I love this here. And to get to the concept of where he's at, of course, he got arrested. And then Paul, and he got to go before King Agrippa. And if you read in the beginning of 26, King Agrippa, he allowed him to say whatever he wanted. He says, here, I'm going to let you have basically the floor. You tell us what you want. And if you read a little bit before, he tells them that, because Agrippa was known of the law. In other words, he knew what the law was of the Jews and everything. So what he was saying was that here, you put me here, I got arrested for what you know is true, but the prophets have spoke of the Lord Jesus Christ, and you arrested me for telling you that he has came. But then he gets to the point after he explains that, hey, that I'm arrested for what you already know should be true. You should know that he was the Messiah, but I got arrested for telling you he was. But now he's going to tell you how he realized he was. And that's what I want to get to, and that's in verse 12. Well, in verse 11 he says, and I punished them often every synagogue and compelled them to blaspheme, and being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them even unto the strange cities. And what he's talking about is what he did before. He's telling King Agrippa, I was the man that fought against the Christians because they said he was the Messiah. And now I'm standing in front of you because I'm telling you he's the Messiah. And so it's kind of reversed. And what I want to get to is, I love to, like I say, this is my favorite, one of my favorite scriptures in the whole Bible. And it says, whereupon, as I went to Damascus, in the verse, this is Paul speaking. He says, with authority and commission from the chief priest, he said, at midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me, and them which journeyed with me. And when we fell all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me, and saying in Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And I said, Who art thou, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, of whom thou persecutest. But rise and stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared unto thee for this purpose, to make thee a minister and a witness both of these things which thou hast seen, and of those things in which I will appear unto thee. Deliver thee from the people and from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send thee, to open their eyes, and to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith that is in me. Amen. Amen. I love that though. He says, midday, O king.
Yes.
There was a point in my life that I got hit and I got knocked down. And what I want to start this week is I want to start a series on what became of that. See, we all know of this, and there's been many messages and books and all kinds of stuff talking about how Paul was converted, and of course he was one of the greatest apostles we ever known, and all the things that he did. Of course, most of the Bible was written by him. But the thing that we got to understand is that he was so impacted by this day, by this midday, that when he got before the king to be released, to give his side of the story, for say, he was supposedly to speak and say, hey, yeah, I preached that Jesus was the king, and he did this and he did that and all this, and I'm supposed to, I'm up here, I'm going to defend myself and say that I had right. But no, what did he do? He says, you know.
Yeah.
He said, King, you know who he was. You know the word. You know the law. You're where it says in in the earlier verses that you're very learned in this law. You knew who he was. You knew that the Jews crucified him and he was the Messiah. But he didn't take advantage of being released. What he said was, "O King, midday. Something happened to me that I can never explain." And if you read a little bit later on, he says, "I don't know if I was in the body, out of the body. I don't know. I just know he was there." And what I want to get to and what I want to start on this is I want us to see that his conversion, there was steps to get him to the place to where he became the greatest apostle that we knew. I don't want to say greatest apostle, but the greatest missionary we've ever had. Let's say that sounds better, because he went everywhere. He didn't just go preach in Jerusalem. He didn't just go preach in Korea. He went everywhere. He went to places that nobody else would go because they were scared. And but what is so wild, and what I want us to learn through these next few weeks, is that he knew, and I've said this many times, and this is what really gets me about Paul, and what really gets me about this ministry, is he knew.
Yes, he did.
What was before him. You know, we talked last week about Memorial Day. We talked about the soldiers and how they gave their lives, and they knew. You know, we talked about the three that laid themselves on the grenades to save their good. They knew. They knew what was fixing to happen. When Paul received his ministry, he knew, because Jesus told him, "Dude, you're going to suffer many things for me. So get ready." And then it says that he asked 3 times, and God said, "Hey, my grace is sufficient for you, buddy." And he said, "Okay, then. I guess he's on it." And he went his way. But what I want to get to today is I'm going to show 4 different people that had this, what we call in the South here in Texas, that we call the Come to Jesus meeting.
Amen. Come on.
Okay? And now, if you're not from Texas, which we all are, but you know what this means. That's like when you're a kid and your mama says, "Hey, buddy, we're about to have a Come to Jesus meeting." You're about to get a good old-fashioned butt whipping.
That's right.
And then you got 2 grown men that's about to say the same thing. "Hey, buddy, we're about to have a Come to Jesus." Somebody's about to get butt whipped. And it ain't, it's because of your stupidity. It's basically what it means. And that's what I want us to understand, is there's a point in our lives as Christians and as ministers, or as members of a church, whatever you want to call it. We got saved.
Yes, amen. Thank you.
And thank God for it.
Yes.
Now some of us, the day we got saved, we said, "Okay, Jesus, I know you're the Messiah. I know you're the Son of God, and you died for my sins." And we go through the whole deal that they talked us through, and we get up and we say, "Hey, I'm saved, okay." And I go to church, and I get me a little Bible, go to the thrift store, buy me a little dollar Bible, and start reading a little bit. And we just go through our lives. Now, to me personally, I don't count that as being the road to Damascus. I count that as a blessing, because you are saved. You realize who Christ is, but you haven't fell on the ground. As he said. He fell on the ground, and the people that were around him. To me, that's the Come to Jesus meeting. That's the Damascus that I want us to realize today. And Paul wasn't the only one that came to that. You know, we can read throughout the Bible. There was many. You know, we can read about Elijah. We can read about David. We can read about many of them that had that ministry beforehand, or had that acceptance and the understanding of who God was, but they never had that moment.
Come on.
And sometimes that moment comes on that day of salvation. Because he says today is the day of salvation. Come. When the Holy Spirit draws us to him, yes, that's the day we're supposed to, he's telling us, "Hey, today is your day."
Yes.
Some of us, that is the day that we wake up and we realize, "Hey, I have more." Just like Paul. Paul was that day. You know, he believed in a religion and he believed in things, but that day he knew what he was fighting against so hard was really the truth. And so it changed his whole life. It changed everything. Like I said, in the next few weeks, I want us to see his steps of when he got the road from the road to Damascus, where he went, what he had to do, and where it went from there, and all the little things that happened. And the same thing with us. That's what should happen to us. See, salvation is great, but God saved us for a purpose, just like he told Paul. "Hey, I did this for a purpose, buddy. I didn't just knock you on the ground so you wouldn't go kill all my Christians," which he did that too. But he's saying that I have a purpose for you. And that's what God's telling us. And I know I keep harping on this, but we have a calling.
Yes, we do.
And until we get to the place of knowing that calling and knowing where God wants us to be, then we're never going to fulfill what He knocked us on the ground for. Now, I don't know if you got knocked on the ground yet, but I did. Actually, I did twice. I'm hard-headed. It takes me a couple times. But I'm like one of them punch-drunk happy boxers where you just keep getting pounded on you and you don't realize, hey, just put your hands up and you won't get hit, buddy. But and that's what it basically had to do with me. But what I'm trying to get to is there's other. I'm going to just bring up 3 other men in the Bible today just to get us to see that there's different ways of getting that road to Damascus. Some were believers all the way through. You know, we're going to talk about Peter a little bit today, which we all know. He denied Christ, but he was redeemed. He knew who Christ was, and he went through all the steps of Christ, but then that day came to stand up, and he couldn't. He didn't. He let self get in the way, and then he ran off. But then that day of salvation, now I want to say salvation, but that day of Damascus came to him one day while they were eating fish. Jesus asked him, do you love me?
Yes.
Yes, I love you. Do you love me? Yes. Do you love me? Yes. And feed my sheep.
Yep.
See, that was his day of Damascus. He knew who Christ was. He followed him from the beginning. He dropped his nets and dropped his family and his wife and left them at home, and he went and did what Jesus wanted to do, saw all the miracles, and then one day some lady says, hey, wasn't you the guy with Jesus? No, I don't know that guy. Yeah, you did. I saw you. You cut off so-and-so's ear. No, I didn't do that. And then he ran. See, so he knew.
Yes, we did.
And then we look at Thomas. And he walked with him every day.
Yes, we did.
And then they come and they tell him, Peter and them come and tell him, the 11 come to Thomas and say, hey, buddy, we saw Jesus. Oh, Lord, here we go again. No, really, we saw Jesus. Well, okay, if you saw him, when I get to stick my finger in his hand and stick my hand in his side, then I'll know he's Jesus. So what did Jesus do? He showed up the next day.
Yes, he
A
did.
few days later. But he showed up and he says, hey, Thomas, look, there it is. That was Thomas's day of redemption.
Yes.
That was Thomas's day of salvation.
Come on.
His day of Damascus was that day, because from that day on, he was totally different.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Is we have it throughout the Bible. We see that you can be a believer your whole life. You can be saved at 13 and just be going through the motions, and in one day, that light shines about you and you hit the ground and he says, I have a calling for you. I have a purpose for you. Get up and go. And you got to be like Paul and arise and go do what Jesus said to do. See, and that's what he's telling us this morning. And that's what I want us to get out of this road to Damascus, because that's what God's really shown me through the ministering through these last few years is I have to be on that road.
Yes.
And even if I know what's coming, I have to say, okay.
Come on.
His grace is sufficient, because see, it is scary. It is hard. It is. And we want it to be easy. And we want to be light. And we want everything to be, okay, God, send me over here. And then I get over there and everything's just going to be hunky-dory and it's going to be perfect. And then all of a sudden we get there and it's like, what in the world are you doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Or who are you to say that? Well, why would God give you a word from me? God speaks to me every day.
Mm-hmm.
See, and we get those things, and then we get a little discouraged, but then we got to say, hey, no, God gave me a purpose.
That's right.
I didn't scoop myself up off the ground because God, just to come over here and hear no. And that's what I'm saying, is the road to Damascus is something such of a more importance, I don't want to say importance, but more engulfed than just your salvation, of accepting your salvation. I don't want to say it's more than your salvation. But see, because when we get saved, we get a purpose in our lives to let everyone else know who He is.
Yes.
If we're one of those that just say, okay, I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I'm just going to go on through my happy life, and we'll let God deal with the rest of them. See, that's not ever getting that road to Damascus. We're not ever accepting that calling that God's given us. And that's what I want to talk to today. I want us to see the next few weeks is the steps that they had to go through. the steps that Peter went through, the steps that Paul went through. Mainly Paul, because he is what we define mostly of the road to Damascus. When you look it up, that's what they say is Paul's conversion. But see, like I said, there was other people in the Bible that was converted. And like I brought it up a little bit. I just want to read a couple of scriptures. I want us to see about excuse me. So let's look at Peter again real quickly. I'm just going to do the scriptures real fast. In Peter, we see, and again, like I said earlier about him denying, it says we can read in John. In John 18, he says, and Simon Peter followed Jesus after he was arrested, and he followed him and did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest and went into Jesus into the palace of the high priest. So one of the disciples got to go in with him, but Peter had to stand outside the door. And then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spoke unto her. And he kept the door and brought in Peter. So he let Peter come in, and then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter as he was going in, art not thou also one of the man's disciples? And he said, I am not. Now I want to go back to verse 15 and 16 real quick, because I read it real fast. It says, and Simon Peter followed Jesus, so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without. So he's standing outside. Then went out that other disciple, which was known to the high priest, and spoke unto her that keepeth the door, and brought in Peter. Now, I want to stop right there, because this is really important. See, Peter was outside, and I never really put it together, but I always thought Peter was standing outside. But he went in, and the lady at the door allowed him to come in. Now, I want you to get this real quick now. Because the other disciple, which they don't mention, he knew of the high priest, and the lady knew that he knew the high priest, so she let him in. But Peter wasn't. So the other disciple, and this is just me and my words, the other disciple it did say that he spoke to the lady, but he had to say, hey, I know this guy. Let him in. He's with me. It's kind of like them, the entourage with the famous people. He's like, hey, this guy's with me. Let him in too. So when Peter goes in, the lady already knows that he knew Jesus and that he knew this disciple, or he wouldn't have been able to come in the door. But what did he say? I'm not him. Then I'm pretty sure she kind of looked at, well, am I letting you in if you're not with him? Did he lie to me too? What are you lying? And so it really made me think about, Peter didn't just know that he just lied. The disciple that was with him just knew that he denied Christ. So sometimes when we deny our calling, we deny who we are, the people around us see that we're denying our calling. So how did it affect the other disciple? It was never brought up who he was, but how did it, we could research him and find out who he was, but how did it affect him? I want you to think about how does sometimes our action of not following our calling, not saying, yeah, I'm Peter, I'm the guy that cut his ear off. And then we read a little bit later on that he does, that the soldier comes and in verses 25, it says, and Simon Peter stood and warmed himself, and they said therefore unto him, art not thou also one of the disciples? He denied it and said, I am not again. But if you read a little bit before it, you see that it's all the guards and stuff standing around. But in other words, he's there, and then it says, one of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, said, did not I see thee in the garden with him? And Peter again denied again, and immediately cock crew. Now there it goes again. Now, I get this. It's so amazing to me. It's because here again, there's a young man that's family, a kinsman of the guy that got his ear cut off, that got Jesus healed. So he knows of the story, and he knows what just happened. And he's like, hey, dude, weren't you there? In other words, aren't you the guy that cut off my my cousin's here, whoever he was. And Peter, oh, that wasn't me. So, of course, then the cock crows, and we all know that he runs off, and you know, he feels sad, and he's depressed, and a lot of commentary depicts him with Judas, how they both betrayed Christ, but yet we see how Peter came out of it and how Judas came out. But that's a whole different message. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, there's two incidences here that didn't just affect Peter, but it affected the people that were with him. And that's what I want us to see about the road to Damascus, and we're going to get into that later on, is how our actions afterwards dictates, or the actions thereof, I guess you would say. So when we see that Peter denied him the first time, the damsel realized that, hey, somebody's lying. I'm going to let you in because you're with this guy, but you're saying you're not. So something's wrong here. And then we also see the other disciple that was with him, which is never mentioned, but it says he had to be there too. So when you're with, so have you ever done that? You know someone and you're like, well, dude, that ain't right. You know, or you get that old, hey, ain't you supposed to be a preacher? Why are you talking like that? Or whatever it is. But what I'm saying is God gave us a purpose, and we have to get to that. We have to realize we have that purpose. Now, with Peter, we go a little bit farther down in John, and we see that Peter basically has his redemptive moment. He has his road to Damascus, as we would say. And or what I'm going to group it in as being his road, his final moment of who he realizes who he is and what Jesus wants. And that comes in chapter 21, verses 15. And we all know the story. It's after Jesus' resurrection, and they're fishing, and they're all together, and he's already been seen of them and everything. And so it said, let's start with 15. It says, so when they had dined, they realized Jesus has called them, and he had fish cooked, and they come out of the boat. And this is the part where, remember, Peter jumps out of the boat when he realizes it's Jeter, takes his clothes off, and he jumps in the water and swims over there. And this is after they dined. It says, and so when they have dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than this? And he said unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said unto him, feed my lambs. And he said to them again the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, feed my sheep. And he saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? And Peter was grieved, because he said unto him the third time, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all thy things. You knowest that I love thee. Jesus said unto him, feed my sheep. Now, I want us to get out of this real quickly. How many times did Peter deny him?
3 times.
How many times did Jesus ask him if he loved him?
3 times. 3 times.
That's redemption.
Amen.
See, he denied him 3 times. Jesus wanted to know, do you love me 3 times? See, and what's really cool about it is Peter got mad. The third time, Peter got grieved. He's like, Jesus, you know. Well, what do you think about it? Now, I want you to get this. And I know this in my hearts of hearts, that I know Jesus was up there getting tried, getting beat, getting ill. But the only voice that he could hear was Peter saying, no, I do not know him. No, I do not know him. No, I do not know him. And the pain came. You know, he was pained by beatings, but he was pained by denying.
Yes.
And I believe that with my heart. So Jesus tells him, Peter, do you love me? So what he's saying is, Peter, I forgive you.
Amen.
Peter, do you love me? Peter, I forgive you. Peter, do you love me? Peter, I forgive you. And what happened after that? What did Peter do? See, that was his road to Damascus.
Yes.
That's when he had to fall down on his face and say, God, forgive me for what I have done.
Yes.
Make me who you want me to be.
Amen.
And he got up and went and did all the great things that he did. And like I said, that's good. We're going to get more into that later on. But I want us to see that, he had that road to Damascus.
Yes.
He followed Jesus. He did all the things God wanted him to do. He was there. He denied him. He did all these things. And all Jesus wanted him to say was yes. Tell me where to go. Tell me what to do. And we know what happened. We know all the things that we can read later on. And all the great things we read his letters. 1st and 2nd Peter, and he teaches us. And we talk about where he says that there's no unclean thing. And Jesus, God gave him the vision of knowing to feed the Gentiles. And so we see that day changed his life. And what's amazing about it is because, see, Jesus appeared to him before. But it wasn't the same as that day. That day, he realized he had a purpose. He realized he was forgiven. Just like Paul. When Paul got knocked down, he realized he was forgiven. He realized he had a purpose. And that's what I'm trying to say. So then we go into, like I talked about earlier, about Thomas. We see Thomas. And we can read the same in John with Thomas. And we see that in his denial. I'm going to just read real quickly. It's in chapter 20. It's verse 24. It says, and this is after Jesus appeared to 11, but Thomas wasn't there. And it says, but Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said unto him, we have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. How many times we said that? Yeah, God, if you don't do this, I don't believe. You can't be God. He says, and after 8 days, again his disciples were with them, and Thomas was with them this time. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, peace be unto you. Now I want us to catch that real quick. Now, wouldn't that be kind of scary? Y'all locked in, and all of a sudden this guy shows up. Like, Lord, he said, he'd have to tell you peace because I'd be running out the back door. But anyway, it says, then said he unto Thomas, reach hither thy finger, and behold my hand, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust into my side, and be not faithless, but believing.
Amen.
And Thomas answered and said unto him, my Lord, my God. Amen. So see, that was his road to Damascus.
Yes, it was.
That was his moment.
Yes.
See, because as we read, he followed. He was part of the feeding of the 5,000 and all the things, all the miracles, the healing of the leprosy. He was part of all that, being sent out 2 by 2s.
Yes.
But yet he didn't believe he was resurrected. He denied him. But Jesus did exactly what Thomas said. He said, here, check it out. They're real.
Amen.
Check it out. I got stabbed. Thomas was like, my Lord, my God. See, he had that moment. And then we can read later on about him and St. Thomas. And we see all the things that he did and the churches that he started. And how Paul and Peter and all them wrote about Thomas. All the great things he did. That was his moment. That was his road to Damascus. That was the time that he realized, I have a calling. I have a purpose. And that's what the road to Damascus is all about. It's not just about the salvation, because we can all say that I got saved. Some of you got saved when you were 2 or 3 years old, got sprinkled or whatever you want to call it. But what I'm saying is, yes, that is great. We should always remember the day we got saved. The day we walked down the aisle and accepted Christ into our hearts. But he wants more than that. He wants that relationship. He has something great for us. And he wants us to say, yes, Lord, yes, Lord. And that's what I'm trying to share this morning. To see, it wasn't just Paul. It wasn't just Peter. It wasn't just Thomas. We can read through it. We can read James. His own brother didn't believe who he was until he saw him again.
Come on.
And look at how it changed him. And that's what I'm saying. See, we all have that moment of believing. But then we got to have that moment of believing that he has something for us.
Yes, amen.
See, because if we don't have the faith and we don't have the strength of knowing that he has something for me to do for him, then we're just going to sit there and just accept that salvation and just go on about our little business. And that's what he's trying to tell us, is we can be above and beyond. And I'm going to share one more story before I close, and this is going to be in the Old Testament. And I want us to put this together, and I'm kind of reaching with this, but I want us to see a moment here. And I want to talk a little bit about Jacob. I'm going to turn to Genesis. And I want us to see in Genesis I'm going to start with 31. And I'm kind of, like I say, it's just kind of a little different, but I want us to see the picture of his moment, okay? Now we see Jacob, and we know the story of Jacob and Esau and how he stole his birthright and he did all that. He was pretty devious, and even when he worked and he got Leah and Rachel, and then he kind of took all his father-in-law's stuff, and you know, he really wasn't an upright kind of guy, but he knew who God was because of his father and his grandfather and all that deal. He knew the laws and he knew all the things. So, and I'm going to show you how we know that he knew God. Is we go to 31, and I'm going to start with just 30. This is after Jacob flees from Laban, which was his father-in-law. He took all the flock, took his wives, and they took off. Anyway, it says in chapter 31, verse 11, it says, "And the angel of God spoke unto me in a dream, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift up thine own eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the and the cattle are speckled and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowedest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred." Now, the reason I want to bring this up real quick is because, see, we see right here, he knows who God is. Well, for one thing, God talked to him. But God said that you vowed, you vowed a vow to me. Now, like I said, I don't want to get into all that because that's a lot to it. But, so we see that Jacob knew who God was. He has spoken to God because God said that you vowed a vow to me. And then he tells him, hey, get up and go back to your kindred. Go back and get things right. Now we know that he's running from Esau because Esau is going to kill him. And we read a little bit farther down in Genesis, and we see that they get to the point of where it's that day they're going to meet. So Jacob sends his wives and all this stuff ahead because he realizes that my big brother's about to give me that come to Jesus meeting that we talked about earlier. Somebody's about to get beat down senseless. And he's figuring it's him because Big Brother is a little tougher than I am. You know, he kind of worked in the fields and all that stuff, and I'm, you know, he gonna whip my, you know what? So he's thinking. So he sends them ahead, and he's like, hey, if something happens to me, y'all know what to do. So somebody comes to visit him, and in chapter 32, verse 24, I'm going to read real quickly. It says, "And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me who, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou doest ask after my name? And he blessed him there. Now, there's, like I say, there's all kinds of doctrine and theological stuff about this, who this was he wrestled. But he wrestled, and in one version it says that he was a champion, that he calls him the champion. But what I want to get to is, see, if we read a little bit farther on, I'm not going to get into that this morning, but if you read a little bit farther on, he meets Esau. When it comes, he's not the same Jacob he was before. Because if you read a little bit farther on and you see where they met, he was receptive to the love of his brother. And not just that, but see, I believe that this night, him wrestling and being blessed, is what he said, you blessed me. And he was. He said, you are now Israel. You're not Jacob. He was a whole nother person, a whole nother man, a whole different. So when he met Esau, And they came, Esau saw him coming. And I could just see it. He was like, I ain't no brother. He sent somebody. He ain't too scared to even come. Look at it. And then he gets closer and he gets closer and he's probably thinking to his mind, who's this guy coming? Because he was different.
Yes.
He was new.
Yes.
He wasn't Jacob anymore. He was Israel. Just like Paul wasn't Saul anymore.
Come on.
He was Paul. Now, I'm not telling us to go change our names to become something better, but if it works, it works. But no, I'm just kidding. But what I'm saying is that I really believe that he saw something different.
Yes.
Yes, he did.
He saw that this is not the same brother that took my birthright.
Yes.
He's not the same brother that deceived everybody and did this and did that and always lied and cheated and got his way and whatever he wanted to do. No, there's something different about this guy.
Yes.
And that's what kept it. And that's why instead of him stabbing him or killing him, he grabbed his neck and kissed him.
Yes.
Yes, he did.
And I really believe that the night before when he wrestled the angel, that was his road to Damascus.
Yes.
Come on.
That's what changed his life forever. And then if you see later on, and we realize the 12 tribes of Israel, and we realize all the things that came about, it wouldn't have came about if he would have been a selfish person.
That's right.
So he changed. And that's what I'm telling us. See, we all have that moment. Some of us, like I said, we have 2 or 3 of those moments. But no, we have that time. And it could have already came for you, or it could be coming for you.
Yes.
That's true.
It could be that moment when God calls you to be that missionary, or He calls you to be that teacher, or He calls you to be that principal, or He calls you to be whatever, and you're scared to death, and you're like, no, or you're like, why? Or whatever it is that comes into your heart, or whatever, you just don't know. You're like, Lord, why? Who are you? And He's like, I am Jesus.
Amen.
Come on.
And this is what I have a purpose for you.
Yes.
And that's what He's telling us, is that this road to Damascus, as scary as it is, and as painful sometimes it is, just like Jacob, he had that hollow on his hip his whole life, and limping all the time, dragging that foot. But that was his moment.
That's right.
And He's got a moment for each one of us. And I'm not just counting the time when we got saved, which was a glorious day. I'm talking about that moment when you realize your calling.
Amen. Yes.
When you realize what your gift is.
Come on.
You realize what your purpose is. And like I said, some of you may already know. Some of you could be like me and got to get knocked 10 times. But no, what I'm saying is that we know when He knocks us on the ground and we just fall out and we just say, okay, God, where am I supposed to go? But what I really love about all of these stories is they got up. And from that moment on, they were not the same.
Amen.
See, and that's what conversion is. That's what's being converted is. And if we read it and we see the definition that man puts on it, it's a change. It's something different than it was before. And that's what we have to be. See, we should have a difference in us when our salvation. I'm not saying that. When we recognize who Christ is and we see His laws and we read His book and we see all the things that He has for us, we should be different, yes. We should think different. We should not want to go to the same places we did. We shouldn't want to hang out with the same people we hung out with. We shouldn't want to do the things we used to do, because He says that we change and go from evil to a godly.
Yes.
But not just that. But when we realize where He puts us,
Yes.
where He sends us, and who He sends us to, my God, it's mind-blowing what can happen.
Yes.
It really is.
Yes, it is.
And as we read the Bible, it's all the way through there. Like I said, we talk about David, and we could talk about Jacob, and we could talk about Daniel, and we talk about all these moments in their lives that was their road to Damascus. Was the moment that they realized, no, this is what God called me to do.
Yes.
Gideon, when he's hiding, he says, no, you're a man of valor. Yeah, I'm a man of valor, though. I hide nowhere, so I don't have to go. But he realized it. That was his moment. And you know what is so cool about it? And what God's really shown me, see, it's nothing that I am. It's nothing that I've done. It's what He's going to do through me.
Amen.
See, so I don't have to be afraid, because it's not me. Because I can't mess it up. Well, I can mess it up, but if I be obedient, Because He's doing it through me.
Yes. Amen.
And that's what I want us to see this morning is there's so much more to this. There's so much we can do. There's so much that we can help. And like I said, when we have our fallouts or we have our doubts, we have our fears. And that's what drove all of them. That's what drove Peter.
Come on.
I could just see it. I mean, you're going in there and you know what they're doing to your master, your teacher, your leader, and he's in there getting beat and he's fixing to die. And they're saying, well, you're with him. And you're like, no, I ain't with him because I don't want no part of that. I could see that. I could see Thomas. Say, man, y'all guys are crazy, man. He's dead. Nobody could survive that. He's dead. I saw it with my own eyes. He's dead. They beat him. I saw him hanging on the cross. He can't be. And we do the same thing.
Yeah, we do.
We're like, no, he can't do that, God. But then he says, yes, look. And I love later on when you read about Paul and he talks about the resurrection, he says, hey, if you don't believe me, go ask somebody that's seen it. And that's what he's telling Agrippa. See, when he got that moment to speak, he didn't talk about himself. He didn't say, hey, you shouldn't kill me or I shouldn't go to prison because, I'm Paul. I'm this, I'm that. No, he said, hey, you're arresting me for what you know is the truth.
Yes.
I'm preaching the truth and you know it's the truth, but y'all still arresting me. And this is why I know it's the truth, is because he came to me on midday. We all have that on midday.
Amen.
We really do. I did. You did. And if you haven't, you're going to, so get ready for it because it's coming. But it's a great moment
Yes, it is.
because we realize, oh my God, what's he going to do for us? Just like he said. And if you read a little bit farther, I really love it because he says, man, if you could just see it again. If you could just been there. And don't you feel that? If you're testifying to somebody and they're like, oh, no, but if you could see what he did. If you could see what he did, if you could feel what it felt like. And they're like, oh man, you believe in that? No, I know it. I know it's real. And that's what Paul said. That's what Peter, afterwards, he realized. My God, he loves me. He forgave me. He knew that I denied him and he forgave me. Just like Thomas. He knew that I didn't believe, but he said, hey, don't be faithless no more. Look, stick your fingers in there. And that's what he's telling us today. Is don't be faithless. Don't be scared because know who he is. Know the purpose that he has for us. And like I said, I'm going to try to close with that. But I want to get later on, I want to get more in depth into how we see the change and how we allow Christ to change in our lives. And sometimes it's not just us changing, but it's that person that has to help us to change. Because
Yes.
if we read a little bit later on with Paul, he was sent to someone.
Yes.
See, so we can't just get saved and we can't just have that road to Damascus and wake up and say, oh, I'm going to do all of this by myself. Oh, I can stay home and I can do this and I can do... No, if we read the change, if we read the conversion of Paul, it wasn't just about that day. It was about the steps that led up to making the man that he was. And I want to close with one thing real quick before we go home. And it's in Acts 15 and verse 3 and 4, just real quickly. And like I said, we talked about the conversion and we talked about verse 15. And this is Paul and them heard of someone teaching that you had to be circumcised, and they're trying to get all the new Christians to get into the law. Anyway, it says, and being brought on their way by the church, they passed, well, let's go to 2. I'll read 2 real quick. And it says, when therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and distribution of with them, they determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other of them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and the elders about this question. The question was circumcision. But anyway, it says, and being brought on their way by the church, they passed through Phoenicia and Samaria, declaring the conversion of the Gentiles, and they caused great joy unto all the brethren. And when they were come to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and the elders, and they declared all things that God had done with them. Now, what is so cool about that and what it really goes back to is Paul's conversion, but then when he goes through, he's sharing all that with the Gentiles and with the church, and he's saying, man, you should have saw all the things that he's done for
Come
us.
on.
You should have saw what he did for us. And Barnabas is there, and they're just, and it made, what did he say? It made them joyful.
Amen.
It made them happy in what just happened. And that should be us. We should be happy in what just happened, or what's fixing to happen, or just like the little prayer thing y'all had before service started. That should make us all happy.
Amen.
Because that's what it's all about. That's church.
Come on.
And that's what I'm trying to say is if you haven't had that moment, pray you have that moment.
Amen.
Or if you have had that moment, be obedient to it. Because that's what God's telling me. Just be obedient to it. You know what I called you to do.
Yes.
You know where you're supposed to be. You know what you're supposed to do. You know the things that I have for you.
Amen.
And even though we're like Paul, we may say, oh God, please take it away. And he says, no, my grace.
It's sufficient.
And sometimes that's all it is. But other times it is that. You know, if we look back at Paul, like I say, I'm going to get into this next few weeks. If we look at Paul, you know, when he got bit, God saved him.
Yes, he
We got shipwrecked. He saved him. Now it was painful, I'm pretty sure. But at the end, he had a purpose for him. Had a reason for him. He had a thing that he had to do. And that's what he's telling us. And when we have that road to Damascus, and we get put on the ground, and we're like, oh, Lord, who are you? And he's like, I'm Jesus. And you said, Lord, what thou have me to do? And he says, okay, this is what I got you to do.
Yes.
And we need to be obedient, just like Paul, just like Peter, and just like Thomas, and get up. And say, oh, Lord, my God. And that's what he's telling us. You see, he has so many things for us to do. And we find so many excuses, and I'm the world's worst about it. I find so many excuses to say, I don't need to go there. No, that ain't but God. Or like I said, well, I got to see your hands. Show me that that's really God. And then he'll show you.
Yes, he does.
But what I'm trying to say is that road to Damascus, that moment in our lives, when we realize what God has called us for,
Yes.
is the greatest moment in your life.
Yes, amen.
Because you know that it's not just about the salvation. It's not just about, which is a great thing, like because he says the angels in heaven rejoice over the one coming. But what I'm saying is when you realize that he has something for us.
Yes.
Yes, he does.
And he wants to use us.
Yes,
And he wants to talk to us. And he wants to give us all these gifts.
yes.
You know, it's like Christmas, man.
Yes.
I used to love Christmas because you wake up and you don't know. But when you get older, you know. But anyway. But what I'm trying to say is that there's so much that comes after the road to Damascus.
Yes.
And there's so much that comes after his salvation. And see, the sad thing is there's so many of us and so many others that just take the salvation. And that's all they want.
Yeah.
You know, they grab a hold of that scripture, work out your own salvation.
Come on.
But they don't do it with fear and trembling, or they don't want to go to the next step. They don't want it to be, no, I don't want to be a Sunday school teacher. No, I don't want to go up on vacation Bible school. No, I don't want to be a volunteer. No, I don't want to do that. No, they don't need no more help at the mission food bank. See, but all those things, that's what gets us. That's what God called us to do.
Yes.
If that's what he called you to do. And like I say, that's your road to Damascus. See, I can't tell you what Jesus said when he knocked you on the ground. Now, you can share it with me later.
Come on.
And just like me, you don't know what he said to me. I share with you what he did to me, what he shared with me, and what he told me. But you have to have that moment. And then when we arise, and we go, and like I said, we're going to get more into that, what happened next. See, that's the most important part. Because, see, that's where a lot of the falling out comes, is because they don't have that what happens next.
Yes.
See, we think we can do it all ourselves. We're self-made people. But, see, when we read later on about Paul and about Peter and about even Jacob, we realize that there was a next step after that moment.
Yes.
Like with Jacob, it was with Esau accepting him. Then he realized there was a change. With Peter, there was a realizing of how he became the leader, and they all looked up to him. He realized that, and how Thomas had to go to a certain place, and James had to realize. And we realize all the little things that come along with it, but you have to have that next step. If we stop at salvation, and we stop at the road to Damascus, then there's nothing else. then that's all we get that one-hit wonder, as we call it,
Yes.
the 15 minutes of fame. We get them goosebumps and we say, oh, that was God, I feel good now. But then we never want to go beyond that. And that's what I'm trying to say. In the next few weeks, I hope to bring all that to you to let us understand that there's more.
Yes.
There's so much more.
Yes, there is.
Whether you're in the first grade or you're 50 years old, there's so much more that He has for us. And that's all I have. Anybody have any prayer
Amen.
requests? Y'all come forward.